The air in Los Angeles crackled with an unusual energy that spring afternoon. Inside the pristine offices of Sunset Boulevard's most prestigious talent agency, phones rang non-stop as assistants rushed through hallways clutching coffee cups and schedule printouts. Something was brewing in Hollywood, and it wasn't just the overpriced espresso that fueled the entertainment industry. Two names kept popping up in hushed conversations: Will Smith and Keanu Reeves. Neither actor knew it yet, but their paths were about to cross in a way that would capture the attention of millions. It started 3 weeks earlier at the premiere of Velocity Surge, Will's latest big-budget action movie. The red carpet event had all the usual Hollywood glamour: camera flashes, designer outfits, and carefully rehearsed smiles. Will, dressed in a tailored blue suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, charmed reporters with his trademark laugh and confident answers. "This film pushed me to my absolute limits," he told Entertainment Weekly, flashing that $1 million smile. "That's what separates the real actors from the lucky ones, you know? Anyone can stand in front of a camera, but not everyone can truly transform." The comment seemed innocent enough until a reporter from Film Pulse mentioned Keanu's latest indie project, Midnight Shadows, which had just received unexpected critical acclaim. Will's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yeah, I heard about that. Good for him. Some guys just have a knack for falling into success. Me, I've had to earn every role the hard way, with actual range." The slight dig might have gone unnoticed if it had been an isolated incident, but over the next 2 weeks, as Will continued his press tour across morning shows and podcast interviews, he found ways to reference Keanu's work with subtle jabs. On The Morning Buzz, the host asked about the physical preparation for his stunts. "I do all my own stunts," Will said proudly. "No doubles, no shortcuts. Not like some actors who just have to look moody and say one-word lines." Anyone familiar with Keanu's work in action films could connect the dots. Then came the numbers. Midnight Shadows, made on a modest budget of $30 million, had somehow outperformed Velocity Surge at the weekend box office, despite the latter's $200 million budget and massive marketing campaign. The industry was shocked. Executives held emergency meetings. Will's team went into damage control. Behind the scenes, tension grew. Lisa Thompson, a veteran makeup artist who had worked with both actors, noticed the shift in atmosphere. "I've been in this business 30 years, she told her assistant while setting up her station. "Never seen Will rattled like this. He's always been the golden boy." Across town, in a modest bungalow in the hills, Keanu remained either unaware or unbothered by the brewing storm. His longtime friend and stunt coordinator, Rick, had mentioned the comments during their morning motorcycle ride. "You hear what Will's been saying?" Rick asked as they took a break at their favorite lookout point. Keanu just shrugged, taking a sip from his water bottle. Everyone's got their own path. That was classic Keanu: brief, philosophical, impossible to rattle. While Will commanded rooms with his charismatic presence, Keanu moved through the world with a quieter energy. He showed up to sets on time, knew everyone's name from the director to the craft service staff, and routinely gave portions of his salary to the crew. Hollywood was filled with stories of his random acts of kindness that never made it to tabloid headlines. Meanwhile, the subtle rivalry captured public imagination. Entertainment blogs ran side-by-side comparisons of the actors' careers, personalities, and acting styles. Social media users chose sides with hashtags like #Team Will and #Team Keanu trending for days. The contrast between them became the subject of countless videos and articles. Will's loud confidence versus Keanu's quiet humility. One man who actively sought the spotlight while the other seemed to accept it as an occasionally uncomfortable part of the job. The unexpected twist came during a production meeting for Nightlight with Jimmy Porter, one of the most popular late-night talk shows. The show's producer, Daniel Garcia, sat at the head of the writers' table reviewing the upcoming week's schedule. "So Thursday we've got Will Smith promoting Velocity Surge," he said, scrolling through his tablet. "Standard interview, maybe a game segment." "Actually," interrupted Tina, the booking coordinator, "Keanu Reeves just confirmed for Thursday too. His team reached out this morning. Apparently, he's announcing some charity initiative. The room, fell silent. Everyone in television knew you didn't book two A-list actors from the same genre on the same night, especially not two with reported tension between them. Daniel looked up, his expression shifting from confusion to intrigue. Both. On Thursday, did Will's team know about this when they confirmed? Tina shook her head. I don't think so. They confirmed last week. A young writer named Josh spoke up. What if we kept them both? Like, Will goes first, then Keanu comes out, but Will stays on the couch? Jimmy could moderate. It would be television. Gold. Daniel drummed his fingers on the table, the wheels turning. That's either the worst idea or the most brilliant one. Let me call Jimmy. 20 minutes later, the decision was made. Neither actor would be told about the overlapping appearance until it was too late to back out without looking petty. In the eye, show's head writer drafted questions designed to highlight the contrast between the two men, while giving each a chance to promote their projects. The team knew they were playing with fire, but the potential ratings were too tempting to resist. The news leaked 2 days before the taping. Entertainment sites exploded with predictions and think pieces. Ticket requests for the studio audience quadrupled overnight. Even people who didn't usually care about celebrity gossip found themselves invested in what might happen when these two very different stars shared a stage. Back at the talent agency, Will's manager paced her office, phone pressed to her ear. No, we are not canceling, she said firmly. That would look worse. He needs to go on, be charming, and rise above this whole thing. After hanging up, she popped 2 antacids and silently cursed the talk show producers. At the same time, in Keanu's modest home office, his longtime agent calmly explained the situation. They're clearly trying to create drama, he said. You don't have to do this. We can find another show to announce the foundation. Keanu was quiet for a moment. No, he finally said, it's fine. The foundation matters more than any awkwardness. And anyway, I've always respected his work. The day before the taping, the entire entertainment industry seemed to hold its breath. Crew members for Nightlight reported that extra security had been arranged just in case. Writers stayed up all night refining the segment. Social media feeds filled with predictions ranging from heated arguments to complete indifference. What no one could have predicted was what actually happened when the cameras started rolling, and 2 of Hollywood's biggest stars came face to face after weeks of indirect jabs. As the red on-air light illuminated above the studio cameras, millions of viewers leaned forward in their seats, witnessing the beginning of what would become one of the most talked-about moments in talk show history. The Nightlight with Jimmy. Porter's studio buzzed with an electricity that even veteran crew members could feel. Audience members had arrived 3 hours early, forming a line that wrapped around the building twice. Inside, makeup artists made final touches, camera operators checked their equipment, and production assistants hurried across the studio floor with clipboards and headsets. Jimmy Porter himself seemed unusually tense as he reviewed his notes in the green room. Known for his easygoing interviewing style and harmless pranks, tonight's show presented a different kind of challenge. He'd need to navigate potential hostility while keeping the show entertaining. 5 minutes to places, called a production assistant through the door. Jimmy straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and headed toward the stage. As he passed the main green room, he caught a glimpse of Will Smith surrounded by his entourage. Publicist, personal assistant, and stylist all fussing over last-minute details. Will appeared relaxed, laughing at something on his phone, though the slight bounce of his leg betrayed his nervous energy. Down the hall in the smaller green room, Keanu sat alone except for his longtime agent, Tom. While most celebrities brought entire teams for talk show appearances, Keanu preferred minimal fuss. He wore a simple black suit that looked like he'd owned it for years, his hair slightly tousled despite the stylist's efforts earlier. You sure you're okay with this? Tom asked, not for the first time. Keanu nodded, that familiar half-smile on his face. It's just a talk show, Tom. But they both knew it was more than that. The audience roared as Jimmy bounded onto the stage, their excitement amplified by the knowledge of what was coming. After a monologue poking fun at the day's political news and a few jokes about Hollywood gossip, Jimmy settled into his desk chair. "We've got an incredible show tonight," he said, his voice rising with practiced enthusiasm. "First up, he's one of the biggest stars on the planet, here to talk about his new film Velocity Surge. Please welcome Will Smith." The crowd erupted as Will danced onto the stage to his own hit song from the 90s. He high-fived audience members, did a quick spin move, and embraced Jimmy with the ease of someone who'd done this hundreds of times before. As the applause died down, he settled into the guest chair, adjusting his designer jacket. "Man, that never gets old," Will said, flashing his trademark grin. "The dancing or the screaming fans?" Jimmy asked. "Both. But mostly knowing my old tracks still get people moving." The interview began smoothly enough. They discussed the new movie, with clips showing Will performing seemingly impossible stunts. He talked about his training regimen, the challenges of filming in extreme locations, and how he'd done almost all his own stunt work. "I'm telling you, Jimmy, when you see me hanging from that helicopter, that's really me, 3,000 feet, up, no green screen." 20 minutes flew by, filled with Will's animated stories and Jimmy's well-timed reactions. Under normal circumstances, this would be when the host would thank Will and introduce the next guest. But tonight wasn't normal. "So, Will, we've got another guest joining us," Jimmy said, his voice carefully neutral. "I thought it might be interesting if you stuck around." A flicker of something, surprise, irritation, perhaps both, crossed Will's face before his professional smile returned. "Sure, man, who you got coming out?" Jimmy turned toward the camera. "He's here to talk about his hit film Midnight Shadows and a special announcement. Please welcome Keanu Reeves." The audience's reaction was different this time. Less screaming, more genuine admiration as Keanu walked out. He moved with a relaxed gait, waving casually to the crowd. When he reached the desk, he shook Jimmy's hand warmly before turning to Will. There was a microsecond of hesitation that only the most observant viewers would catch. Then Will stood, extending his hand with a broad smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Keanu took it, his grip firm, expression inscrutable. "Good to see you, man," Will said, loud enough for the microphones to catch. "You too," Keanu replied simply. They both sat, Will still in the primary guest chair closest to Jimmy, Keanu in the secondary seat further away. The studio felt like it was holding its collective breath. "So, this is pretty cool," Jimmy said, looking between them. "Two of the biggest action stars together. Have you guys worked together before?" "Never had the pleasure," Will answered quickly. "Our paths just haven't crossed that way." Keanu nodded in agreement. "Different projects, different times." "Well, Keanu, congratulations on Midnight Shadows." "It's doing amazing numbers," Jimmy said. "Thank you. We had a good team," Keanu replied, his voice soft enough that he had to lean toward the microphone. "Good team and apparently good timing," Will interjected with a laugh. "Lucky release date, right? Nothing else big coming out that weekend?" There it was, the first subtle dig. A production assistant visibly winced off stage. "I think there's room for all kinds of films," Keanu responded evenly. "Your movie looks incredible. The helicopter sequence alone must have been intense to shoot." The graceful deflection seemed to throw Will slightly off balance. He'd expected either defensiveness, or perhaps Keanu to miss the jab entirely. Instead, he got a compliment. Jimmy jumped in, directing a question to Keanu about his preparation for Midnight Shadows, which apparently involved months of training in several obscure martial arts. As Keanu described the process in his characteristically understated way, Will sat back studying him. The subtle shift in dynamics wasn't lost on the audience or the millions watching at home. They'd expected fireworks, but were instead witnessing something more intriguing. Will Smith, usually the most commanding presence in any room, being quietly upstaged by Keanu's genuine humility. "The film connected with people in a way we didn't expect," Keanu was saying. "That's always the hope, but you can never predict it." "Well, some films have 9-figure marketing campaigns behind them," Will commented. "Others have to rely on, actual quality." He laughed as if it were just a joke about the industry. Jimmy's eyes widened slightly. The line between playful banter and genuine criticism was being crossed. "Speaking of quality, Jimmy said hurriedly. Keanu, I hear you have some news to share? Keanu nodded. Yes. We're launching a foundation to support children's hospitals with art therapy programs. The idea is to bring creative outlets to kids facing long-term medical challenges. The audience applauded warmly. Jimmy asked follow-up questions about the initiative, which Keanu answered thoughtfully, explaining how visiting a children's hospital during filming had inspired the project. Throughout Keanu's explanation, Will's expression grew increasingly tense. He was used to being the focal point, the one whose stories captivated rooms. Yet here was Keanu, hardly trying at all, effortlessly drawing attention with a project that no one could possibly criticize. That's amazing work, Jimmy said genuinely. Will, have you been involved with anything similar? Will shifted in his chair. Sure, lots of charity work over the years. Different focus areas, though. He paused, then added, You know, it's interesting how some actors are just naturally likable off-screen. Makes up for limitations on screen, I guess. The audience's reaction was immediate. A collective intake of breath, a few uncomfortable laughs. Jimmy's smile became fixed as he realized the conversation was veering into exactly the territory the producers had hoped for, but that any responsible host would try to avoid. What kind of limitations are we talking about? Jimmy asked, unable to resist the potential viral moment. Will shrugged, his casual gesture belying the deliberateness of his words. You know, some of us have to actually transform for roles. Really. Dig deep, show range. Others just have to show up, look intense, and say a few words. He mimicked a deadpan expression and monotone voice. Whoa. The parody of Keanu's famous line from The Matrix hung in the air. Camera operators zoomed in on Keanu's face, capturing the exact moment when the attempt to publicly shame him registered. The audience had gone completely silent, all pretense of casual entertainment abandoned. What happened next would be replayed millions of times in the days to follow. As tension crackled through the studio, all eyes turned to Keanu, waiting for his response. Time seemed to slow down in the studio as Will's mockery of Keanu's famous "whoa" line echoed through the sudden silence. Camera operators instinctively tightened their shots, catching every subtle shift in the two actors' expressions. In the control room, producers exchanged wide-eyed glances, torn between professional excitement at the drama unfolding and genuine discomfort at how personal the attack had become. Jimmy Porter sat frozen behind his desk, his usual quick wit failing him as he realized the conversation had veered far beyond playful celebrity banter. His show thrived on viral moments, but not at the cost of making guests feel ambushed. He reached for his water glass, buying himself precious seconds to think. Will's smile remained fixed, but there was something challenging in his eyes now, a barely contained frustration that had clearly been building for weeks. The box office numbers, the critical reviews praising Keanu's authentic presence while describing Will's performance as trying too hard, it had all accumulated into this moment of public confrontation disguised as comedy. In the audience, phones were raised high, recording every second. A young woman in the third row whispered to her friend, "This is so uncomfortable," but neither of them looked away. Keanu hadn't moved. He sat with the same relaxed posture, one hand resting lightly on his knee, the other on the armrest. But those who knew him well might have noticed the slight narrowing of his eyes, the almost imperceptible straightening of his shoulders. For several heartbeats, he simply looked at Will, not with anger, but with something closer to curiosity. "You know," Will continued, filling the awkward silence, doubling down now that he'd crossed the line, "I was watching some of your early work the other day. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, right? And man, it's amazing how you've managed to turn clueless surfer dude into a 30-year career." A few uncomfortable laughs scattered through the audience. This wasn't the Will Smith they'd come to love, the charming, self-deprecating star whose interviews always felt warm and inclusive. This was something harder, with an edge that cut through his usual charisma. "I mean, don't get me wrong," Will went on, gesturing expansively, his voice taking on the rhythm he used when telling his carefully crafted talk show anecdotes. "We all have our thing. Mine just happens to include, actual dialogue, emotional range, maybe a song and dance number now and then. He laughed at his own joke, but it sounded hollow even to his ears. Jimmy finally found his voice. Well, everyone brings something different to. It's interesting you mentioned Bill and Ted, Keanu interrupted softly, speaking for the first time since the mockery began. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but it immediately commanded attention precisely because he so rarely interrupted anyone. The studio grew even quieter, if that was possible. Even the rustling of the audience seemed to stop. That film taught me something important early on, Keanu continued. My character Ted had this line, "Be excellent to each other." Pretty simple, right? But sometimes the simplest ideas are the hardest to live up to. Will's smile faltered slightly as he realized Keanu wasn't going to respond with anger or defensiveness. As for the whoa thing, Keanu said with a small, self-aware smile, you know, I've never really understood why that stuck so much. Just a word. But if it's given people some joy or a laugh over the years, that's cool. The humanity in his response created a subtle shift in the room. Several audience members nodded unconsciously. Will leaned forward, not quite ready to let go of his momentum. Sure, but don't you think there's something to be said for pushing yourself? For evolution as an artist? Some of us are constantly trying to grow, to challenge ourselves with each role. The implication that Keanu did not was clear. Jimmy tried, again, to steer the conversation to safer ground. Both of you have had such incredible careers. Evolution is interesting, Keanu said thoughtfully, again speaking over Jimmy, but with such natural timing that it didn't feel rude. I think it happens in different ways for different people. For me, the challenge has always been trying to find the truth in each character. Sometimes that's complicated, sometimes it's simple. The complicated parts aren't always the most honest ones. He paused, taking a small sip of water. The entire studio waited, captivated. The thing about acting that I've always loved, Keanu continued, is that it's not really about us, you know? It's about serving the story, serving the other actors in the scene, serving the audience who wants to feel something real, even in an unreal situation. Will's expression was hard to read now, part skepticism, part unexpected interest. This wasn't going how he'd planned. Easy to say when the critics are calling you effortlessly compelling while picking apart everything I do, Will said, a note of genuine hurt breaking through his bravado. And there it was, the real issue, exposed, under the studio lights. Not just professional jealousy, but the deep vulnerability that lurks beneath it. The fear that all your effort might mean less than someone else's natural ease. The audience felt it too. The sudden authenticity cutting through the manufactured tension. Keanu nodded slowly, acknowledging the pain without dismissing it. Critics can be rough. I've had my share of bad reviews. Wooden. Blank. Limited. I've read them all. He gave a small shrug. After my first really bad review, my friend told me something I never forgot. He said, "The only review that matters is whether you can look in the mirror and know you gave everything you had." A production assistant, checking her watch, signaled to Jimmy that they needed to wrap up soon, but Jimmy waved her off. Whatever was happening here felt more important than the scheduled commercial break. "Look," Will said, his voice losing some of its performative quality. "Maybe I came in a little hot tonight. It's just..." He stopped, seeming to debate whether to continue with honesty or retreat to safer territory. "My last 3 films, I gave everything. Everything. Trained for months, did my own stunts, barely saw my family. And then you come along. Make this small movie that everyone loves, and it all looks so damn easy for you." The rawness of the admission hung in the air. The audience was so quiet now you could hear the air conditioning humming through the studio. Keanu leaned forward slightly, meeting Will's gaze directly. "It's never easy," he said simply. "Not for any of us." There was something in the way he said it, with absolute conviction but without a trace of self-pity, that landed differently than all his previous responses. It wasn't just about acting anymore, but about the human struggle behind the fame, the insecurities that even superstars couldn't escape. The public sees such a small piece of what we do, Keanu continued. They don't see the doubts, the failures, the takes that didn't work. They don't see the days when you question everything about your choices. He paused. Success isn't a competition, you know? Your light doesn't have to dim for mine to shine. Jimmy, sensing a shift in the emotional current, gently brought the conversation back to professional territory. Both of you have such different approaches but such incredible impact. Will, your energy and commitment are legendary. And Keanu, your ability to bring stillness to action scenes changed the genre. Will nodded slowly, some of the tension visibly leaving his shoulders. My acting coach used to say there are as many ways to approach a role as there are actors. Maybe I needed that reminder. For the first time since the confrontation began, something genuine passed between the two stars. Not friendship exactly, but a glimmer of professional respect. We should probably let Jimmy get to his commercial, Keanu said with that familiar, half-smile. Yeah, man's probably sweating through his expensive suit by now, Will added, a hint of his natural humor returning. Jimmy laughed with obvious relief. I can neither confirm nor deny the sweat situation happening under this desk right now. He turned toward the camera. We'll be right back with more from Will Smith and Keanu Reeves after this break. As the on-air light dimmed and commercials began playing, the two actors remained in their seats, still watching each other with new awareness. The conversation that would happen during that break away from the cameras would prove even more surprising than what the audience had just witnessed. The red on-air light had barely dimmed when the studio burst into activity. Makeup artists rushed forward with powder for both actors. A sound technician darted in to adjust Keanu's microphone, and Jimmy's producer bent down to whisper urgently in his ear. The audience buzzed with excited chatter, everyone trying to process what they'd just witnessed. In the midst of this controlled chaos, Will and Keanu remained in their seats, an invisible bubble of quiet understanding forming around them. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Will let out a long breath, running a hand over his face. Man, I really came at you, didn't I? He said quietly, just between them. Keanu shrugged slightly. We all have those days. Nah, don't let me off that easy. Will shook his head. That wasn't cool. I've been carrying this thing around for weeks. Before Keanu could respond, Jimmy leaned toward them both. Guys, that was, intense. We're back on in 2 minutes. Should we change direction? Talk about something else? Will waved him off. We're good, Jimmy. I promise not to be a jerk when we're back. A flicker of relief crossed Jimmy's face before he was pulled away by his producer again. Will turned back to Keanu. Look, while we've got this minute, I just want to say... He paused, seeming to search for the right words. This business gets in your head sometimes, you know? Everything's a competition. Box office numbers, social media followers, who gets the magazine cover? Keanu nodded, his expression thoughtful. Easy to forget why we started doing this in the first place. Exactly. Like I used to just love the work. Being someone else for a while, making people feel something. Will's voice had lost all its earlier edge, replaced by a quiet sincerity rarely seen in public. Then somewhere along the way it became about being number one, staying on top. The makeup artist finished with a final dab of powder on Will's forehead and scurried away. They had maybe 30 seconds left. Fear is a tough companion, Keanu said simply. Those 5 words hit Will with unexpected force. Fear. That's exactly what it was. Fear of irrelevance, of being replaced, of the next generation coming up behind him. Fear that all his effort, all his careful career choices, might not matter in the end. 10 seconds, called the floor director. Will nodded at Keanu, a silent acknowledgement passing between them, just as the on-air light blazed red once more. Welcome back to Nightlight, Jimmy said brightly to the camera. We're here with Will Smith and Keanu Reeves having what might be the most honest conversation I've ever been part of on this show. He turned to his guests. Before the break, things got pretty real between you two. The audience leaned forward collectively, eager to see if the tension would reignite. But Will's body language had completely changed. He sat more casually now, the performative polish momentarily set. Aside, yeah, Jimmy, I want to say something about that, Will said, looking directly at the camera before turning to face Keanu. I came in here tonight with some stuff that had nothing to do with you and everything to do with my own insecurities. That wasn't fair, and I apologize for it. A murmur of surprise rippled through the audience. Celebrity apologies were common enough, but they usually came days later in carefully worded Instagram posts, not spontaneously on live television. Keanu nodded, accepting the apology with characteristic understatement. Nothing to apologize for. We all feel pressure in different ways. See that right there, Will said, pointing at Keanu with a genuine smile. That's what people connect with in your work. That realness. You're not trying to be anything but yourself. Jimmy, sensing the opportunity to steer the conversation into more meaningful territory, asked, "Do you think that's one of the hardest parts of this industry? Staying true to yourself when there's so much pressure to be what everyone else wants?" "Absolutely," Will answered immediately. "There's this constant push to fit yourself into what worked before, to follow formulas. Your last action movie made $1 billion? Great, here's another one just like it. After a while, you can forget who you really are beneath all that." He turned to Keanu. "I think that's what I've always admired about your career, man. You do big franchises like The Matrix and John Wick, but then you'll do some small indie film nobody expected. You follow your gut." Keanu seemed momentarily taken aback by the compliment. "I've been fortunate," he said after a pause. "I've worked with people who gave me the freedom to make those choices." "It's more than that, though," Will insisted, warming to the topic. "You've built a certain kind of trust with audiences. They know you're not just chasing paychecks. That's rare." The conversation had transformed so completely that the audience seemed almost unsure how to react. They'd come expecting drama and were instead witnessing something much more valuable, an honest dialogue between two artists about the challenges of their craft. "What about you, Keanu?" Jimmy asked. "What's been the hardest part of staying grounded in this business for so long?" Keanu took a moment before answering, his eyes focused somewhere in the middle distance as he considered the question. "Perspective," he finally said. "Remembering that making movies is a privilege, not a right. That we get to tell stories for a living." He paused. "And remembering that no matter how big a movie might be, it's just one small part of someone's day. Maybe they're dealing with illness or loss or just trying to pay rent. Our job is to give them a break from that for a couple hours." The studio had gone completely quiet again, but this time not from tension, from collective recognition of a simple truth well expressed. "That's beautiful, man," Will said softly. Jimmy, visibly moved himself, turned to Will. "You've been in this business since you were a teenager. How do you maintain that perspective?" "Not always well," Will admitted with a self-deprecating laugh that invited the audience to laugh with him. "Just ask Keanu how I've been handling my latest box office numbers." This broke the emotional tension perfectly, sending a wave of laughter through the studio. Even Keanu chuckled, ducking his head slightly. "But seriously," Will continued when the laughter subsided, "the best advice I ever got came from my grandmother. She told me, the measure of a person isn't how they act when everything's going their way. It's how they respond when it isn't." I try to remember that. "Wise woman," Keanu said. "The wisest," Will agreed. "She also used to say I talk too much, which—" He gestured to himself with a grin, drawing more laughter. Jimmy seized the natural opening. "Speaking of talking, Keanu, you mentioned a foundation before we got sidetracked. Can you tell us more about that?" Keanu nodded, straightening slightly in his chair. When he spoke about the Children's Hospital Art Therapy program, his typical reserve fell away. He described meeting a young girl who'd been creating elaborate fantasy worlds through her drawings while undergoing cancer treatment. Art gave her control when everything else was out of her hands, he explained. "I thought, what if we could bring that to more kids? Professional artists, supplies, equipment, whatever they need to express themselves during the toughest times." He outlined the foundation's goals. Will listened intently, nodding along. When Keanu finished, Will leaned forward. "That's incredible work," he said with complete sincerity, then turning to Jimmy. "How do we help?" There must be a website or something where people can donate. The question caught Keanu by surprise. He hadn't expected Will to become an advocate so quickly. We're just launching next month, but yes, there's a site. Put it up on the screen, Will said to the producers off camera. Let's get these folks involved right now. Jimmy, recognizing a television moment when he saw one, immediately signaled to his team. Can we get that website on screen? And maybe we can get a QR code for people at home? Within moments, the information appeared on the monitors. The audience broke into spontaneous applause. You didn't have to do that, Keanu said quietly to Will during the applause. I know, Will replied. But it's a good cause and... He paused, a smile tugging at his lips. I figure I owe you one after coming at you like that. As the applause died down, Jimmy checked his notes. We've got about a minute left. Anything else either of you want to say before we wrap up? Will and Keanu exchanged a look, something unspoken passing between them. Then Will turned to the audience, his expression earnest. Just that sometimes our worst moments can lead to our best if we're willing to be honest about them. I came in here tonight with my ego all bruised up, and instead of a fight I found... He gestured vaguely. I don't know. A reminder of why we do this in the first place. The audience's response was immediate and heartfelt. Not the raucous cheers of entertainment, but the warm appreciation of witnessing something authentic. As Jimmy began to close the show, the camera caught one final exchange between the two actors, Will extending his hand and Keanu taking it in a grip that was more than just a polite goodbye. It was the beginning of something neither had expected when the night began. By the time the nightlight credits rolled, social media was already exploding. Clips of the exchange between Will and Keanu spread like wildfire, each platform offering its own take on what viewers had just witnessed. What had begun as potential celebrity drama had transformed into something far more rare and valuable, a moment of genuine human connection played out in front of millions. Outside the studio, fans who had been waiting for hours in hopes of catching a glimpse of their favorite stars pressed against the barriers. Phones held high. Security guards maintained order as the studio doors opened and staff began filtering out into the cool evening air. Inside, the set was being dismantled for the night. Cameras wheeled away, lights dimmed. In a quiet corner away from the bustle, Will and Keanu stood talking, their body language relaxed, all traces of earlier tension gone. My team probably has a crisis management plan already in motion, Will said with a self-deprecating laugh. They're gonna flip when they realize I'm not being canceled on Twitter. Keanu smiled. Might even be the opposite. Will checked his phone, eyebrows rising. Man, you're not kidding. My mentions are blowing up, but it's all positive. He scrolled through, reading aloud. Most real thing I've ever seen on late night. Will Smith just went up 10 notches in my book. Huh? He looked genuinely surprised. People connect with authenticity, Keanu said simply. A production assistant approached nervously. Sorry to interrupt, but your cars are ready whenever you are. Will nodded his thanks, then turned back to Keanu. Listen, I meant what I said about your foundation. I'd like to help, beyond just promoting it tonight. That would be great, Keanu replied. The kids would love it. Will pulled out his phone again. Let me give you my number, my real one, not the one my assistant manages. The two exchanged contact information as staff continued to bustle around them, pretending not to eavesdrop on this unexpected friendship forming between two of Hollywood's biggest stars. As they walked toward the exit, Will asked, You busy tomorrow? Maybe we could grab lunch, talk more about the foundation. Keanu considered for a moment. I have training in the morning for the next John Wick, but I'm free after 1. Perfect. I know a place in Malibu. Real quiet. Good fish tacos. Dyke paused at the door. And listen, what happened tonight? Thanks for not meeting my energy with the same. That could have gone very differently. Keanu shrugged. We've all had rough days. With a final handshake, they parted ways, each sliding into the back of a waiting SUV with tinted windows. As Will's car pulled away from the studio, his phone buzzed with a text from his wife. Proud of you tonight, that was beautiful to watch. He smiled, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. Sometimes the weight you didn't know you were carrying became apparent only when you set it down. The next morning, entertainment shows across the country led with the same story. On Morning Buzz, hosts Carla Chen and Devin Washington could barely contain their excitement. If you missed Jimmy Porter's show last night, you missed what everyone is calling the most authentic celebrity moment in television history, Carla began, as clips played on the screen behind her. What began as apparent tension between Will Smith and Keanu Reeves, Devin added, turned into this incredible conversation about fame, insecurity, and staying true to yourself in Hollywood. Let's watch part of it again. The clip showed Will's apology and Keanu's gracious response, followed by their heartfelt discussion about the pressures of the industry. I've been covering entertainment for 15 years, Carla said when the clip ended. And I've never seen anything like this. No publicists, no prepared statements, just two human beings having an honest conversation. And social media is here for it, Devin replied, gesturing to the screen where tweets and comments scrolled by. The hashtag #RealRecognizesReal has been trending since last night, with fans sharing their own stories of overcoming ego and insecurity. In a quiet Malibu restaurant overlooking the Pacific, Will and Keanu sat at a corner table, plates of fish tacos between them. They'd been talking for nearly 2 hours, the conversation flowing easily from Keanu's foundation to their respective childhoods, their early struggles in the industry, books they'd read, motorcycles Keanu loved, and music Will had been working on in his home studio. So here's what I'm thinking, Will said, pulling a small notebook from his pocket. What if we expanded the art therapy concept to include music, filmmaking, maybe even some basic coding for the older kids? Give them different creative outlets, depending on what speaks to them. Keanu considered this, nodding slowly. I like that. Broader range of expression. And what if... Will hesitated, then plunged ahead. What if we did a small benefit together? Nothing huge, just something to raise awareness. Maybe a conversation like we had last night, but intentional this time. He grinned. Without me being a jerk first. A conversation about creativity and healing? Keanu looked intrigued. Could be powerful. As they discussed logistics at a nearby table, a teenage girl nudged her mother and whispered, Mom, look, it's Will Smith and Keanu Reeves together. Mother glanced over discreetly. Leave them be, honey. They're having a private conversation. But the girl was already pulling out her phone, snapping a quick photo before her mother could stop her. Within minutes, the image was online. Two superstars deep in conversation, completely at ease with each other. No cameras or publicists in sight. By evening, the photo had been shared thousands of times, with captions speculating about everything, from a secret film project to a budding bromance. Will's publicist called him 3 times before he finally picked up. Please tell me you're not really planning something with Keanu without consulting us first, she said. Exasperation clear in her voice. Will laughed. Relax. We're just talking about his foundation, but yes, we might do something together for it. A foundation. Her relief was audible. That's actually perfect. The optics on this whole thing have been incredible. You're trending for all the right reasons for once. The optics, Will repeated, a trace of irony in his voice. Right. Because that's what matters here. After hanging up, he stared out at the sunset from his home office window, thinking about how quickly the industry tried to package and commodify even the most genuine moments. What had happened with Keanu hadn't been about optics or reputation, management. It had been about reconnecting with why he'd become an actor in the first place, to move people, to tell stories that mattered. His phone buzzed with a text from Keanu. Got a call from my agent. Apparently we're the new Hollywood power duo. Will smiled and typed back, next they'll announce our buddy cop movie. You in? The response came quickly. Only if I get to say, whoa, at least once. 3 weeks later, on a bright Saturday morning, Will pulled up to the Los Angeles Children's Hospital, parking next to a sleek motorcycle he recognized immediately. He grabbed the guitar case from his back seat and headed inside, nodding to the security guard who directed him to the 5th floor. He found Keanu in the hospital's newly renovated activity room, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a young boy who couldn't have been more than 8. They were bent over a sketch pad, Keanu showing the child how to draw perspective lines for a cityscape. Around the room, other children worked on various art projects with volunteers, their medical equipment temporarily forgotten in the joy of creation. Keanu looked up as Will entered, offering a warm smile. "You made it. Wouldn't miss it," Will replied, holding up his guitar case. "Ready to add some music to the mix?" A little girl with a colorful headscarf looked up from her painting, her eyes widening in recognition. "Are you going to sing for us?" Will knelt down to her level. "That's the plan. Maybe you can help me?" As Will unpacked his guitar and began a simple, upbeat melody, Keanu returned to his drawing lesson. Neither man looked at the hospital staff discreetly filming for the Foundation's website, or at the parents watching with tears in their eyes. They were simply two artists sharing their craft with kids who needed a bright spot in difficult days. Later, as they helped clean up art supplies, Will bumped Keanu's shoulder lightly with his own. "So, that benefit idea we talked about? I think I've got it figured out. Not a fancy gala, just this, but bigger. A day of creativity at the Hollywood Bowl. Artists, musicians, actors, all working directly with kids from hospitals across the city." Keanu nodded thoughtfully. "Simple, real, I like it." "Who would have thought," Will said, shaking his head with a smile, "that me trying to shame you on national television would lead to this?" "Life's strange that way," Keanu replied. "The worst moments sometimes open doors to the best ones." They walked out of the hospital together into the California sunshine. Both men carried a lightness that had nothing to do with fame or box office numbers, and everything to do with rediscovering purpose. What had begun as an attempt at public humiliation had transformed into an unexpected friendship and a shared mission that would impact thousands of children in the years to come. Sometimes, the most meaningful scenes happen after the cameras stop rolling.